Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the mind of a thinker who literally, completely revolutionized how we view human society, Thomas Hobbes. He didn't just casually add new ideas to political philosophy, he completely re-engineered the whole process of thinking itself. He took the chaotic, messy world of politics and tried to turn it into a rigorous, predictable science.
So let's kick things off with the ultimate question, the one that completely flipped traditional philosophy right on its head. Can politics actually be understood like physics? Now, before Hobbes came along, asking that would have sounded absolutely absurd. But to him, the answer was a resounding, unquestionable yes.
You really see this stark difference when you compare ancient moral wishful thinking with Hobbes's cold, hard scientific reality. Thinkers like Plato and Aristotle took a normative approach. They were always asking, what should a good state look like, focusing heavily on morality and high ideals. But Hobbes, he completely changed the game. He took a descriptive approach, asking why and how is a state actually formed in the real world. He wasn't interested in what humanity ought to be. He was completely obsessed with what humanity scientifically is.
To grasp this radical shift, we are going to follow his exact logical blueprint. We'll start with the Galileo of politics. Look at his scientific method. Explore man as a physical machine, calculate the math of the state of nature, break down the social contract and sovereignty, and finally, evaluate Hobbes's legacy.
Part 1. The Galileo of Politics. Let's look at the chaotic historical context that forged his brilliantly structured mind.
Hobbes was born in 1588 into a world of intense fear. Fast forward to 1651, and he's publishing his absolute masterpiece, Leviathan, right in the middle of the horrific bloodshed of the English Civil War. Order and security were his ultimate goals. But the real turning point, that was 1636. He meets Galileo during the height of the scientific revolution. Seeing how Galileo used mathematics and laws of motion to explain the physical universe was a massive revelation for him. Driven by the horrors of war and deeply inspired by science, Hobbes sought to become the Newton of political science. He literally wanted to find the exact laws of motion that govern human societies.
Part 2. Hobbes's scientific method. Let's see how this rigorous approach builds the absolute foundation of his entire philosophy.
He didn't just casually sit down and write about politics. He engineered a complete, unbroken causal chain. First, he started with basic physical matter and physics in De Corpore. Then he led that directly into human psychology in De Homine. And finally, he constructed the citizen and the state in De Sive. It's a perfectly organized, highly scientific sequence.
The crucial takeaway here is understanding this specific method he borrowed directly from the scientists of his day, the resolutive compositive method. Imagine you're trying to understand how a really complex watch works. What do? You take it apart down to its smallest gears, that's the resolution or the analysis. Then you logically put it all back together to see how the whole machine actually operates. That's the composition. Hobbes basically did this with society. He dismantled it down to its core, individual human atoms, studied their basic drives, and then logically reassembled them to build the state.
To pull this off, he completely rejected inductive observation. He didn't want to just look at history and take a guess. Instead, he favored strictly deductive reasoning and what he called the geometrical method. Just like a geometric proof starts with self-evident axioms to prove a really complex theorem, Hobbes deduces the absolute necessity of the state through a strict, unbreakable chain of cause and effect. He entirely strips away religion and traditional ethics, treating human reason purely as a tool for the mathematical calculation of self-interest.
Part 3. Man as a physical machine. To truly understand the state he's building, we first have to understand his wildly radical view of the human being. Enter mechanical materialism. Hobbes argued that the entire universe is made of absolutely nothing but matter and motion. No spirits, no immaterial soul, nothing like that. Because of this, human beings are simply complex physical machines. Literally every thought, every feeling, every sensation you have is simply reduced to physical motion pressing against your senses. And because we're just machines, our behaviors are entirely predictable. He strips away all moral judgment here, which is fascinating. What we casually call love or desire, Hobbes scientifically redefines as appetite, which is just a physical motion pulling us toward an object. And what we call hate or fear is aversion. a physical motion pushing us away. We are entirely driven by these mechanical forces, with the ultimate overpowering drive being simple self-preservation.
Part 4. The math of the state of nature. Now, let's take this mechanical human behavior and drop it into a hypothetical world without any laws or government. This creates a perfect mathematical formula for chaos. Keep in mind, this isn't necessarily a real historical era he's talking about, it's an analytical thought experiment. Step 1. Humans are physically and mentally equal enough that even the absolute weakest can figure out a way to kill the strongest. Step 2. Because resources are inherently limited, this equality inevitably leads to competition. Step 3. That competition breeds intense diffidence, basically extreme paranoia and mistrust. And finally, step 4. This paranoia erupts into preemptive war and conflict. It's a strict, terrifyingly logical chain reaction.
Which brings us to his absolute most famous, chilling conclusion. Without a state, life is a perpetual war of all against all, making human existence, as he put it, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. It's so crucial to realize that this wasn't just a pessimistic, emotional outburst from a grumpy guy. No, it's the strict, inescapable logical result of his four-step deduction of human nature.
Part 5. Social contract and sovereignty. So how does this mechanical human figure out an escape route from this brutal, nasty reality?
There is a vital distinction to make here. In the state of nature, humans have a right of nature, meaning we have the absolute terrifying freedom to do literally anything, even harm someone else, if it means we survive. But we also have a law of nature. This is where our calculating, mathematical reason kicks in. Logic tells us that if we keep exercising our absolute freedom, we are definitely going to die violently. Therefore, reason demands that we seek peace and willingly give up some of that dangerous freedom.
This realization leads straight to the social contract. But notice, for Hobbes, this contract isn't some loving moral bond or divine agreement signed in the heavens. It's purely a rational calculation. Driven by the mechanical fear of violent death, citizens mutually agree to hand over their rights to an artificial person, the Leviathan. Political order basically becomes a strict, rational necessity just to survive.
And what kind of power must this Leviathan actually wield? Well, the logic is brutal, but totally consistent. Sovereignty must be absolute. Power must be entirely indivisible. Why? Think about it. If you divide power, say between a king and a parliament, you're inviting disagreement. Disagreement naturally leads to conflict, and conflict slides you right back down that mathematical formula into the chaotic state of nature. The sovereign must act as a mortal god on earth, with total, unquestionable authority, because mathematically that is the only logical way to guarantee lasting peace.
Part 6. Hobbes's legacy. Let's take a step back and see how this visionary framework holds up against other political giants, and look at where it falls short.
Hobbes's systematic materialist blueprint really stands in stark contrast to his peers. Take Aristotle, who thought the state was perfectly natural. For Hobbes, it's completely artificially engineered by fearful humans. Or look at Descartes, who strongly believed in a separate mind and body. Hobbes was a pure materialist. To him, even the human mind is just physical motion. And when you compare him to John Locke's vision of a naturally peaceful state of nature that only requires a limited government, Hobbes sees a default state of brutal war that demands absolute, undivided power.
Now, while his logic is undeniably stunning, we do have to acknowledge the critical limitations of his incredibly reductionist view. Trying to explain complex human consciousness, culture, and morality merely as matter in motion is a pretty massive oversimplification, right? Plus, he kind of ignores historical nuances entirely. In fact, critics like C.B. Macpherson argue that Hobbes didn't actually discover universal human nature at all. Instead, his supposedly scientific model just perfectly mirrored the selfish, possessive individualist of the emerging 17th century market society that he happened to live in. Yet, even with these limits, his massive contribution in shifting political thought away from medieval theology and toward modern empirical analysis is absolutely undeniable. So, I'll leave you to ponder this final question as you analyze the fascinating, machine-like precision of his political blueprint. Did Hobbes's scientific view of humanity actually reveal the ultimate truth of our nature? Or is his Leviathan simply a brilliant, terrifying reflection of the fear and chaos of the English Civil War? Think about how calculating your own political choices might be. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the hidden mechanics of the world around you.